We live in a time where masculinity is shamed, and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Bellet.
Welcome back to the BraveCo podcast this week. Guys, we have something fun that we're going to do this week. And honestly, we're going to add it to our regular repertoire of podcasts.
I wonder what repertoire really, I can't even say it. Repertoire.
Maybe I didn't even use that right. It doesn't even matter. Here's the thing. Cole Zick is with
It's already starting fun.
Cole Zick's with me this week. So you guys ask us tons of questions on our social media, in sentiment all the time. And so Cole and I are going to answer some of the biggest, hottest, most asked questions that you guys send us. And so we just thought it would be really fun. First one, Cole, is do you really believe in aliens?
Is that really one of the questions?
No.
Funny. The reason he's saying this is kind of funny. We did we had a little alien dialogue like a year ago.
True.
And every time my wife sees the clip on Instagram, she gets so mad at me that we had the alien dialogue. It's like, why did you do that? Like, wait, why does it matter? People are going to think you believe in aliens. And I'm like, and?
Did you say you don't?
You don't, babe? What do you mean? How do you know?
Oh, yeah. Our wives are, they're always on us about.
My wife's always on me.
All right. We're moving on. Okay.
Thanks, babe.
First question. What's one thing every father should model for his kids? This is a great question, by the way.
It's a great question.
Because we don't, as a dad, like no one really tells you what to model for your kids as a dad.
One thing?
What do you think is the most important thing?
Oh, that's so hard. I mean, I would say the spiritual answer is model love for the Lord. I mean, if only picking one thing, like modeling love for the Lord, then by nature brings them to the Word of God, where there's lots of great teaching lesson and manhood and how to live and how we're to carry ourselves. And so, like, if I only had to pick one, I think. Besides
that.
Well,
because I like that.
Can I give more to that though?
Yeah, please do.
Because I also think sometimes young boys see lots of women modeling a love for the Lord. They don't always see men modeling a love for the Lord.
Yeah, it's real.
Right? Like,
that's real.
The stereotype would be women are at the prayer meetings. Women are the ones that worship. Women are the ones that do Bible studies. And so I think for dads to be modeling, we're a family that goes to church. We're in the house of the Lord. We're serving. They're watching their dad be involved. They're watching their dad lean in. The dialogue Saturday night isn't mom wants to go to church and the dad's trying to get out of it the next morning.
Yeah.
I don't know that we always realize as dads and husbands how our love for the church and the Lord is actually going to determine where our kids are at with it.
I would add to that just strong, healthy leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like kids basically believe what they see you do, not what you say.
Yeah.
And I just know that that's true. And so being a man of your word, showing up, leading by example.
Yeah.
Like be a strong leader. What you want your kids to become, because you're really raising adults. I mean, they're your kids that you're raising into adults. Whatever you want, whatever the attributes are that you want in your kids, that's what you're modeling. Yeah. And so to me, like leadership doesn't have a day off.
Yeah.
Doesn't take a break.
That's right.
It doesn't make excuses. And so I think you're right, though, Cole. If we just had to pick one thing, absolutely falling after God's heart.
Because it's not as obvious as you think it would be.
It's not. It's true. Yeah, that's a great question. What, Cole, just on that, like, what do you do day by day? What's like one thing that you do to lead that in your family?
Yeah. I think a lot of our dialogue with our kids on how they make decisions, we're unique in the fact that our kids are pastors' kids, right? So I try to never, I do not use any type of, well, you're a pastor's kid. If people at our church say, you're a pastor's kid, I'll correct them. Like, don't say that. Like, we're not asking them to be good because their parents are pastors.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's not on the docket. However,
be good because you're going to get a spanking.
Right. Once each one of my kids, because they all really have their real and first encounter with the Lord at a different age. once they have had that, I have begun to use their relationship with the Lord to help guide them.
Yeah.
Say, hey, so you're like,
Great.
when the older two boys in particular, they're the ones that, they'll pull pranks and they'll do things at school, and almost always just harmless stuff, but still stuff where, they've crossed lines before, of course. And I'll ask them, how's your relationship with the Lord right now? I haven't really been super connected with him lately. Maybe that's why you felt like it was okay to cross the line, because you weren't thinking, yeah, you're right. Like, I think a big part of it for us in our home is using the moments they've already had and helping them to remember who they are based on what they've already experienced from the Lord. Even disconnected from being our kids, I think also the way that they watch us. I think one of the big things in our home that Kate and I try really hard with is we know they're going to watch how we talk about people in our home.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yes, how we talk to people.
Yes.
But I want them to watch how Caitlin and I talk about people when nobody else is around.
Yeah. That's
going to teach them a lot about the Lord.
It's real.
Right. And so those are a couple of the really big ones where if we're going to forge a culture of honor, that starts with the way they watch us talk about people.
Yeah.
And hey, have you listened to the Lord? Are you connected with him? If you're connected with the Lord, how'd you get to the point of making that choice and using that as some of the dialogue?
It's great, man. Next question. What's the hardest thing about marriage for men? I'll answer this and then you can go if you want to. We don't all have to answer everything. For me, I think the hardest thing about marriage is the emotional aspect. For most men, it is showing up emotionally.
Yeah.
Our wives' greatest needs are to feel safe, to feel seen, and to feel known. And the challenge that for me, for lots and lots of years, was to make my wife feel safe, seen, and known. The safe one was easy in the sense that I wasn't going to go crazy and yell at her. And I don't have like a bad temper or anything like that. But the seen and known and the safe, seen, and known. So for me, that's when she's in a hard time, am I staying in that with her? So when she wants to talk about something hard, am I listening to her in a way that brings connection?
Yep.
Am I able to communicate in a way that makes her feel safe no matter what happens? Am I initiating conversations that lead to her wanting to open up emotionally?
Totally.
I always think that the man's job of leading never ends. So it's why, like, when we're dating, we always open a door for a woman, right? And even when you're married, you still open the door practically. Like, you go over there and you open the door and your wife walks through it. Like, that's a sign of a gentleman. Well, I think a man should open a door emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. Great. You're constantly opening that door for your wife. That's the hardest thing to do consistently in marriage.
Yep.
Is to show up and go, okay, the vulnerability, I'm the doorway to that.
Yeah.
I have to be vulnerable. I have to be a safe place. I have to model that it doesn't matter what you say, I can handle it.
Yeah, that's great.
Physically, right? I'm going to be the leader physically, working out or watching what I eat or how my body affects, the people around me, or even opening up a door emotionally so that she wants to be physical with me, right? Like being there for your wife, showing up day in and day out, because you have to learn healthy boundaries to do that. You got to learn healthy communication to do that. You have to look at your triggers to do that. That's a big thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't have, shocking, I don't have a better answer.
Dang. Well, I took your answer.
Yeah, you did take exactly what I would have said.
What does real accountability look like in friendship?
That's a great question. And actually,
tell me.
So I have a men's group I do on Tuesday mornings. And what's so funny is I thought we were going to come to a point where I'd want to be able to reference the scripture today. And I thought, I'm going to go figure out what the reference is. And then I never did. So this is in Matthew somewhere.
That's a good verse.
It's Matthew somewhere. This is Matthew somewhere. But he talks about, it's Jesus giving a parable of these two men that are in church. And one of them is saying, his prayer is, man, God, I'm so glad that I'm not like these sinners. I'm not like this tax collector. I'm not like da-da-da-da-da-da. The other guy sits there beating his chest, distraught, and says, Father, forgive me, for I'm this awful sinner.
Mm.
And, he of course, the conclusion that Jesus draws is the second man is the man that has the right heart as he's
Right.
coming in before the Lord, is this awareness of his place before God.
Mhm.
And I think as we kind of dialogued about this Tuesday morning, and when you look at accountability and even what the Lord's looking for, I think one of the biggest questions that men need to ask themselves is, am I correctable still?
Mm.
Right? Because this guy's heart,
Yeah.
he was actually correcting himself. He was so correctable.
Yeah.
He was correcting himself before he walked in. And I think a lot of men, the more that we think we've become at something, the more we think we've conquered something, the less correctable we become.
Mhm.
Right? So, I have relationships in my life that I would say are accountability relationships, but it's not like we're meeting every single week saying,
Yeah.
hey, here's where my failures are, help me with them. I think it's a big part of healthy accountability is I'm self-aware enough to know when I need to call Jay and ask Jay into my world right now, right? It's not like you and
It's
I,
basically every day.
it's just because it's not like it has to be every day. It's not like it's like it necessarily has to be a
Yeah,
daily thing. Now,
for
for some,
sure.
it does. If
Some
you're like,
weeks. Yeah.
if you're fighting to get out of pornography,
Yeah.
if you're struggling with alcohol, if you have certain things that are more of a regular daily struggle, perhaps. But as you start to gain victory, it's like, I would say accountability looks more like, hey, when I do screw up, I'm going to that person right away with my challenge. When they come and say, hey, I think I watched this situation or we were in this moment, you could have and should have probably done this differently.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
To me, that's accountability, and we can even use, we had a great conversation last week. Our families were together. This thing happens. You call and say, hey, I saw this, wanted to throw this thing out to you the way that you handled this with your boys. I think the manner in which I respond to that determines if I'm actually want to be accountable and if, and that is, am I correctable by somebody that's not a boss or an authority figure that's
true.
So like to me, accountability is more of a state of heart than it is a meeting time. It is more, have I surrounded myself with people that have the right to speak into my world and that I know I'm going to run to if I fail or if I'm close to failing? And sometimes that is a frequency thing. I think most of the time it's I'm constantly cultivating relationship with the people that keep me accountable.
Yeah, I love it. In my mind, there's two types of accountability. There's accountability that is defensive, and there's accountability that's offensive. And to me, the accountability that's defensive is like, oh, you made a mistake, got to correct that mistake, which is fine.
Yep.
There's definitely a massive place for that, and we need it. The offensive accountability to me is about building.
Yeah, that's great, Jay.
Taking account for your ability. So you started a church a couple years ago.
Yep.
And we have been...
We started at a church.
You started at a church, yeah. You took over a church.
Yes.
Why do you got to correct me on that?
Well, because the people that have been there before us, we need to.
Sorry, y'all.
We didn't start it.
Cole came in, and he became a lead pastor 2 years ago. Is that?
There you go.
Okay. And probably the first year, I probably checked with you every week, like, how's it going? What are you doing? Were you?
Yep.
And we talked a lot about, you're like, oh man, I'm changing the way that I'm reading the Bible. I'm changing the way that Caitlin and I are working on preaching. And I think that being able to talk through like what you want things to look like. And we're looking at like, to me, it's what is your potential? And are you maximizing your life to reach the potential that God's called you to do?
Yeah, that's great.
Because I think when a man has a target, when you have a big, awesome target that you're inspired to, it makes everything else go like, okay, I'm tempted over here, but gosh, I'm going this way.
100%.
And so I think what men need, as much as the don't sin, you talk to your wife wrong, and listen, we all do that every day in the sense of we're helping men do that. I'm having to watch myself. All that stuff's great.
Yep.
What men typically don't have in their life is someone that's inspiring them to greatness.
Right. Pushing them to the calling, the next thing.
When I look at Jesus and the disciples, often he went, yeah, get behind me, Satan, for sure, which would hurt if you're Peter. Or, hey, this is how to. But Jesus didn't do for his disciples a ton. He wasn't constantly talking about be careful.
Yes.
Although there was some of that. And I want to be very clear. But Jesus was showing them where the target was constantly.
All the time.
And he was correcting them about the target.
Yep.
Constantly correcting them about
that's great, Jay.
This faith. Oh, you have little faith. Like, have more faith. He's talking about the sin, but mostly he's talking about you guys are called to greatness.
Yes.
Even when they're arguing about who's the greatest, he doesn't turn around and say, "You arrogant fools.
Yeah.
Why are you arguing about who's the greatest?" He tells them how to be the greatest.
Yeah.
He goes,
Good.
if you're like a child is the one that's the greatest.
Yeah.
And he gives them this thing to aim at. So I think what accountability, it's offense and defense. You need some defense.
Great picture, Jay.
But most people play defense too long and they never have a picture on the offense. They never know what it's like to score.
Yeah.
All they know what it's like is to not be scored on. They're so worried about falling that they never, ever play offense.
That's great.
Got to play offense, y'all.
Score some buckets.
Dude, for sure. Okay. What's one thing every man should process before marriage?
I mean, my answer is going to be pretty expected from me, I think.
Do it.
Where are you at in your sexual struggle?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's probably one. I mean, there's lots of things you got to process before marriage.
Yeah.
It's hard to say what's the most important because there's tons of them.
Yeah, it's great.
But I would say sexuality is a big one. Marriage is not going to fix your addiction if you have it. It is not going to take away your drive for pornography if you're struggling with it. You have to get that healed separate from relational preparation.
Yeah.
Having sex, if you're somebody that's like, hey, I'm waiting until I'm married to have sex. Hopefully, if you're a Christian, you are doing that. But starting to have sex is not going to fix your lust problem.
No.
It doesn't address
It'll compound it.
Yeah, it'll compound it. And so I think that's one of the big areas where you really got to go after that. You got to really figure out the why, like why, if you're struggling in that area, why am I struggling in it? Figure out what it's become to you. It becomes that dopamine release of the orgasm becomes some type of medicine for some issue that you have. You got to figure that out. You got to learn how to manage that in a healthy way. And, I don't know that you can spend enough time in that area.
I agree. It's great. It's great, Cole. We don't got to go into that anymore. Making sure that you're on the straight and narrow, you've got control is great. That's a good question. What's one daily habit that will change your mental health? Okay. So I went through a nervous breakdown in 2009. Stay with me. This isn't going to be a long story. I could already see you dozing off.
I'm not dozing off. Although I've heard this story 25 times.
Yeah, that's true. Went through a nervous breakdown. What that did in me is it created this mindset that I'm fragile. I couldn't drink a glass of water just carrying it with one hand. I lost the use of my hands for a year. I couldn't hardly drive because I couldn't use my arms very well. It broke me down to nothing. For 4 or 5 years after that, I had this belief system that I had to be careful because I had to get on medication to get out of it. It was horrible. Demons were showing up in my room at night. I could see them with my eyes. Like it was insane, the amount of torment that I was in. And because of that, the way that I saw myself created this prison. I was better than I was in 2009, in 2014, but I was trapped in this prison of anxiety every day because I saw myself as fragile. Like I can't throw a football. I can't play basketball. I can't walk 2 miles because my body's going to freak out. It's going to be in pain.
Yeah.
I had muscle twitches all the time. The anxiety of being fragile created the symptoms that I was believing.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have that in and of itself, like exact thing, but they grew up in a home where they weren't told that they were valuable.
Yeah.
They have these insecurities. They have this mindset, this belief system about himself that's keeping him in this
Yep.
prison of pain.
Yep.
What I had to do is wake up every single morning. I had this prophetic word that my dad gave me. Actually, the biggest breakthrough I had was I was crying on the phone about to go preach in Seattle. And I call my dad crying because I was just under so much anxiety. He says, "Hey, you have this thing written across your forehead. It says fragile." He said, that's demonic. It's what the enemy is wanting you to
Wow.
believe. You're not fragile, you're agile. And he started telling me, like, you have to take action and get that thing off of you.
Yep.
So I'd wake up every morning. I used to wake up every morning and check what's wrong with me. Literally, like,
Wow.
is my arms okay? Are my legs okay? And I was terrified that stuff would happen to me. So I'd wake up in the morning and I would remind myself of who I was every morning. This is how I walked myself out of hell 5 years later. I built inside of me this confidence that I am who God says that I am, that I can do what God says I could do. And I did it little by little by little by little. I was so kind to myself. When I worked out, I didn't just like go try to prove it. I started with little tiny workouts.
It's great.
And it expanded it and grew my confidence. And I think for a lot of people's mental health, confronting the way that you see yourself
is huge,
because that wasn't built by you.
Yep. It's great.
It was built by your environment.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I think that's huge. I would give just an easy, quick, practical one. There's actually been a lot of data that points to a 15 to 20-minute nap where it's almost like
you would say that.
It's a computer reset in your brain, right? So I will oftentimes during lunch, instead of like if I sometimes have to pick lunch or nap, I'll take a nap.
You didn't even laugh when I said you would say that.
Well, yeah, because it wasn't funny. If you say a funny joke, I will laugh.
I think it's because your heart's calloused.
I'll laugh if you have a funny joke for sure. But one of the things that they've discovered is it's really like restarting your computer. Like, you know how like if you have an electronic thing and it's not working, it's glitching, sometimes you just shut it off, turn it back on, it works better. So I will a lot of times, like if I have to get into the afternoon and in the afternoon I have to write a sermon or prepare something that takes creative thought, I'll actually take a nap to reset my brain, shut off all of the tasks, and then I wake up kind of refresh focus.
Can I give you one more benefit to it?
Yeah.
So a lot of UFC fighters and grapplers do this. They train in the morning and they take that nap. And what happens is it actually helps your body not just to recover from the workout, but to remember and to work on the stuff that you were trying. Like you will be 20% better after you sleep than you were before you went to sleep.
I've even seen that your subconscious, Carolyn Leaf says this, that your subconscious will solve a problem while you nap.
Yep.
You'll wake up with the solution.
My problem is if I sleep during the day, I can't sleep at night.
I take somewhere between an 8 to 15-minute nap every day at some point.
You set a timer?
I don't have to.
Oh, wow.
My brain wakes me up. I'll set a timer for 20 minutes just in case.
Yeah.
I never am I sleeping still at 20 minutes. Can't remember the last time that the timer woke me up.
Wow. Last question. How do you define success as a man?
We have a whole podcast on that. You want to go first?
Yeah. I think being able to show up into every environment that you come into and be present. And because why I say that, when I look at Jesus and he's in the storm. And he's like, he hasn't lost his mind. He's not running away from it. He's like, oh, I know my place here in the storm. When I see Jesus being persecuted, he's present. He's not somewhere else. He's not medicating. He's not running away. He's like, I know my purpose right here.
That's great.
In persecution. When you see Jesus show up and he's leading his disciples, he's present. He's not off somewhere else. He's in it. And so when I think about like, well, what does it mean to be a man? It means that you're intentional, that you're present, that you're led and driven by your values, your vision, your mission.
Yeah, it's great.
I think that it's really simple. It makes it less challenging. Like when I think, what's the best thing I can do when I go home? Be present.
Hmm.
Show up with my kids, show up with my wife, pay attention to the things that need done at the house. Like, because otherwise I think these other definitions are so lofty,
Yeah.
it's like, it's so much like, I gotta be this alpha guy that doesn't even really exist.
Well,
So yeah, like I said, doesn't really exist. And I know alphabet, you're an alphabet guy.
alpha, beta.
Yeah, alpha beta. That's my answer.
I mean, I don't know that I have a different one.
Yeah.
I might say it in a different way.
Yeah.
I think I would agree. I think answering the call of the Lord in every area of my life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I believe that God is involved in our life where he actually gives clarity and vision and instruction and mandate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that we're saying anything different really
Yeah.
in saying that. I think being my mandate with my kids, am I getting better at doing that every day? My mandate with my calling and my vocation and my ministry, for me ministry, but vocation, am I fulfilling that? And am I so present that I'm,
Yeah.
growing in that? So, I mean, I would say same thing with maybe a different angle of what's God called me to in each of these areas, but it's not any
great.
different thought.
Yeah, I love it. Guys, hopefully this is interesting and helpful to you. If you have questions, send us your questions. You can send them to me, jason@braveco.org if you want, or you can literally DM us on Instagram. That's a great way. But we want to answer the questions that you have and help you guys grow stronger. They're also good for us. But
You could also call Jason.
yeah, 530.
Just joking.
Yeah, no, don't call me. But guys, I love you. Thank you so much for watching our podcast. Bless you this week. Be brave. Hey, BraveCo men. Hopefully you loved this week's episode. Listen, if you have not subscribed to our podcast, you are already behind. Go ahead and click right here to subscribe to our podcast. And if you have not watched last week's episode, you can click right here and watch last week's episode. And listen, if you want to upgrade your wardrobe, you can check out some of our new hats that we have in stock and all our other swag. Go to braveco.org and you can look at our store there. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.